Joe Carter is famous for one reason and one reason only: hitting the biggest home run in Blue Jays history and perhaps the most memorable World Series home run ever. His career goes beyond that home run, however. Carter had a long career, playing in 16 seasons from 1983 to 1998, most of them with the Blue Jays, but he played for multiple other teams as well. In his career, Carter hit nearly 400 home runs, over 1,400 RBIs, stole over 200 bases, had over 2,000 hits, and slashed .259 with a .306 on base and .464 slugging for a .771 OPS and 105 adjusted OPS. He's a 5-time All-Star and received MVP votes in 8 separate seasons. One of those seasons is interesting to say the least. In 1990, Joe Carter may have had the worst season in baseball history in which a player also received MVP votes. That season, Carter played for the San Diego Padres, the only season he spent with that team. He led the league in 2 categories: games played and at-bats. He hit 24 home runs, stole 22 bases, and drove in 115 RBIs. He was in the top 40 in those 3 stats, as well as extra base hits and total bases. On the surface level, a 2020 season with over 100 RBIs and other counting stats looks great, but that couldn't be further from the truth, and all of those stats are a facade for just how poor his season was. Carter slashed .232 with a .290 on base and .391 slugging for a .681 OPS and an .85 adjusted OPS. It was not a great offensive season. Carter was able to achieve 20 plus home runs and stolen bases because he played so much. He played in all 162 games and had nearly 700 plate appearances. His .290 on base percentage was over 30 points lower than the league average, but because he had such a massive amount of opportunities to get on base, he was bound to get on enough times to steal bases or hit home runs. That is the same reason why he racked up a ton of RBIs. In 1990, Carter consistently batted either 4th or 5th in the lineup. The typical 4 players that would bat in front of him would be Bip Roberts leading off, followed by Roberto Alomar, then Tony Gwynn, and lastly Jack Clark. All 4 of those players had great on-base percentages ranging from above average to crazy high. Since the hitters in the lineup ahead of Carter were fantastic at getting on base, it should surprise nobody that he had ample opportunity to drive them in. Even as a poor hitter, Carter still had all those chances to collect RBIs. Many of you may be thinking, sure, Carter didn't have a great season, but he was still a main force in the Padres lineup and showed durability. His season wasn't even downright terrible, as there have been plenty of worse offensive seasons that gained a couple of low-tier MVP votes. Is it surprising to see Carter get 1 or 2 low-tier votes as well? All of that is true. Carter's season, from an offensive point, is by no means the worst season a player has ever had in which one received an MVP vote. Mark Belanger, perhaps the worst hitter of all time, received an MVP vote in a season he had an adjusted OPS of 61. However, consider the fact that Joe Carter in 1990 had a WAR of -1.7. -1.7. He brought negative value to the Padres. Among all players in the history of baseball, Carter's -1.7 WAR is in the bottom 300 all time for a single season. Hundreds and thousands of player seasons and Carter ranks at the bottom. Among all players with at least 600 plate appearances in a single season, Carter's -1.7 WAR is the 12th worst all time. Players that had lower WAR amounts didn't see much playing time as they were presumably released or demoted following a dreadful performance. Carter may have been bad, but he played each and every day. His WAR is so low due to 3 main reasons: his low on-base percentage, his low slugging percentage, and his defense. 1990 was a down year for Carter. From 1983 to 1989, Carter slashed .268 with a .307 on base and .468 slugging for a .776 OPS and 110 adjusted OPS. In 4 seasons after 1990, Carter slashed .265 with a .317 on base and .502 slugging for an .820 OPS and 117 adjusted OPS. He was fairly consistent over that 10-year stretch outside of that single 1990 season. Since he couldn't get on base a lot and didn't hit for a lot of power, Carter's value fell. His defense was also a liability. Carter was a poor fielder during his time in the big leagues. Among all players in MLB history, Carter's -15.6 DWAR ranks 44th lowest all time. His 1990 season was the worst of his career. He had -3 D-WAR, which ranks 19th lowest all time for D-WAR in a single season. Carter was not only a poor defender, he played most of his games in center field, one of the most important defensive positions. Being a poor defender in an important position will bring down your value tremendously. After presenting you this information, I haven't even gotten to perhaps the most mind-boggling point. It would be one thing if Carter received a single 10th or 9th place vote. Carter received 2 votes, one for 7th place and one for 8th place. There's somebody out there who thought Joe Carter was the 7th most valuable player in the National League in 1990. I don't know who that person is, but I hope to find out one day. In case anyone was wondering, it's also not as if Carter's contributions helped San Diego reach a playoff appearance. The Padres finished with a below 500 record and were underwhelming all season to say the least. Joe Carter had no business receiving even 1 MVP vote, yet he received 2, and one of them was for 7th. Amazing, really. While he may have been a great player and hit the most iconic home run in MLB history, his 1990 season was downright awful and will go down as the worst season in which a player also received MVP votes.